Lantanas are that kind of showy plant, and
so the trailing ones do well in the shade.
The trailing ones do in the shade. The mounding ones have to have sun. And if you live in an area that it never freezes, if you live in California in some areas, you'll see these things grown as patio trees. They'll grow them with a single trunk up about this tall and then have just a mass of flowers on the top. When I see those things, I know two things. Number one, they don't have hard freezes. Number two, they don't have our kind of wind. Because we occasionally get those patio trees in, but we have to protect them when we get winds like we've had this spring, or you can't get the tops busted out of. But lantanas are an old-fashioned plant, but I think they're worth spending some time talking about because the new varieties do have so much to offer, and they're just really good plants. Yes?
Are the trailing ones the same size as the mounding ones?
No, the trailing ones are going to mainly stay no more than probably a foot tall.
I have a trailing one that's gotten real leggy. I guess I'll just use it.
When it gets through its heavy spring flower, feed it and cut it back. Doesn't ever hurt them to cut them back. I think Esperanza is always worth talking about because, you know, you talk about a plant that loves hot sun, a plant that doesn't mind drought, a plant that gets big, a plant that gets no bugs. What else can I say about Esperanzas? They're just a really good plant.
Deer resistant.
Deer, they may or may not eat it. Yeah. But they're about as trouble-free a big flowering perennial as you're looking for. But keep in mind that there are actually 3 different forms of Esperanza that are commonly sold now. Plus there is one, whether I call it native or not, but there's one common one around here. There was a big breakthrough a few years ago when Greg Grant, who used to be one of our horticulturists here, found a variety of Esperanza which the bloom spikes, the heads, were about twice as big and did not make as much seed, although it makes some seed, and stayed in bloom for a much longer period of time. He selected that variety, named it Gold Star, and all of the Esperanza that you buy, of the big yellow one that you buy in nurseries these days, should be Gold Star. You will occasionally see other Esperanzas sold that will not have nearly as big a head of flowers. And another common question that I get, they will make the long, some at least, the long seed pods, the bean-like seed pods, and everybody always says, well, can I plant the seed? Yes, but I don't recommend it, because the chances of that seed coming back and being as good as the plant that it came from are minimal. I mean, that plant is a select variety. If you planted 100 seeds, probably 5 of them would be as good as the parent. And the other 90, well, probably 5 of them would be as good as the parent, 5 of them wouldn't bloom at all, and the other 90% would be kind of a mediocre flower. So in the case of Esperanza, if you want to propagate Esperanza yourself, propagate it from cuttings. Don't ever try to save those seeds and grow the seed out. Now your regular Gold Star Esperanza, if you don't prune it, and if it doesn't freeze real hard, is probably going to grow somewhere between 12 and 15 feet tall in a given summer. And so it makes a big plant. This is a, I won't say improved, this is a slightly different variety. And if you look at this, you'll see the little red veins down in the center of the flowers. This is more of a compact Esperanza. And at maturity, this is probably only going to be about 6 or 8 feet tall. And it's going to be a little bit more spreading. So if you want an Esperanza that's a little bit more manageable, and I don't know if this one has a common name to it or not, but this is the one you can just tell by looking at the flower whether it's the really big or whether it's a more compact form, and it's certainly worth growing. There's also now a pure orange Esperanza, and once again they have taken a selection and started propagating it exclusively from cuttings so that they're all the same. But you may see an Esperanza called Orange Star offered for sale. It doesn't get as big as the Gold Star, and it's a little bit more spreading, but it'll grow easily 8 to 10 feet. So if you like the look of the big yellow one, but you'd like to see it in orange, look for the variety they call Orange Star. And once again, I think for sunny areas, they're just one of the best plants that you can put out.
When do you propagate those? What time of year?
Anytime that you have mature wood. This wood is a little soft, a little succulent. The woodier portions of it, like this stem's starting to get fairly woody. You could probably cut little sections out of here and get it to root. But while this wood is real soft and green, it's just going to rot. It's not going to form roots well. Questions about Esperanza?
How large is the Orange Star?
Orange Star about 8 to 10 feet, maybe 12.
deadhead those seed pods?
That's a good question. You'll have more flowers, but you will have flowers whether or not you deadhead them. I mean, you can just plant Esperance and pretty much forget about it other than watering it. But if you deadhead it, if you fertilize it a little bit, it will produce even better. Yes, ma'am?
What's the name of the compact one?
It's called compact. I don't know. We can do like the other horticulturists. We can just make up a name for it and call it whatever you like. But I don't think it has really a cultivar name that you're likely to see on it. But we just call it. Well, some people call it gold throat or orange throat because of the little bit of reddish coloration to it. But I've not heard a consistent name. Every grower I know has a different name for it. So I just look at it and don't ask them what it is.
How many years do they last?
20, 15, 20, yeah. They're fairly long lived. Used to be they lasted until we had an extremely hard freeze, but we haven't had a hard freeze in 25 years here. So, yeah, they last a long time.
Can we dig and transplant this?
If it's not too big, you can transplant.
Can you cut it back and transplant in the, like spring?
In the early spring, absolutely. Yeah, that would be the time to do it just as it starts new growth. It does bring up an interesting question too, because in the winter months, with any freeze at all, they will freeze back to some extent. The leaves will turn brown, will fall off, and you've got this bunch of sticks standing there, and you wonder how far should I cut it back? Well, if you want to cut it back and you just want to cut back the part that's frozen, you just almost have to go down the trunk scratching the bark, and until you get down to green bark, that wood's totally frozen and it's not going to come back out. If you're in a neglected garden like mine, or let's say you're just in a busy garden where you don't have time to do everything when you should, I will usually just let it go until it starts to come out in the spring. And if the plant is this tall, but the new growth starts out here, I know everything above that point's frozen, I'll cut it off there. New growth comes out here, cut it off there. I will usually mulch them. I like mulching most perennials 2, 3, 4 inches deep in the winter months, because one of these days we're going to have another 1983 winter or another 1989 winter, and things are really going to freeze hard. They'll freeze all the way to the ground, but if you got that extra 3 or 4 inches of mulch, they're not going to freeze underneath that, and they'll come right back out. So if you're not sure how far back they've frozen, wait until they start coming out in the spring, and then wherever the green growth is coming out, cut it off just above that point. You're taking off the frozen part of the plant. Okay, let's talk about a couple of other very sun-loving plants. Deer-resistant plants, hummingbird-loving plants, or plants that hummingbirds love. Salvia greggii, and if you're looking for one of the hardiest perennials you could ever plant, Salvia greggii probably would be at the top of the list if you have a sunny place. There's not much negative to say about this plant. The deer don't eat it, it doesn't freeze, it blooms all the time. It always blooms heaviest in the fall. In fact, one variety of this they commonly call autumn sage. But if you're looking for a plant that you can pretty much forget once it gets established, it's going to be Salvia greggii. But there are some differences in the different forms of greggii. Originally there was nothing but a red form. Now we have it in red, 3 different shades of pink, lavender, white, coral. There's even one closely related one they call hot lips. It has basically a white flower with bright red edges to parts of it, although every flower comes out a little bit different. But this is the plant that is one of the most trouble-free plants in the world. The red form I don't recommend as highly because it sprawls. I mean, it just kind of flops out. It's beautiful, the hummingbirds love it, but if you plant the red form, figure about every 3 or 4 years, you're going to pull it up, throw it out, and plant another one because they just get downright ugly. The pink form is much more upright, probably the most upright of the Salvia greggii. The other colors are somewhere in between, but the red one's the only one that's really sprawling. And like I say, once these things are established, just not much of anything ever goes wrong with them. And since I'm telling you about Salvia greggii, I'll have to tell you about a little plant that I think goes really well with it. This little plant is called skullcap. There's a pink form and a white form. Scutellary is its botanical name. But the skullcaps in the pink and the white are extremely sun-loving plants. They love the hot, bright sun. I've got a big bed planted along my driveway that has this as a tall plant and has this trailing and spilling out over the rock wall around it. And it's a great combination. But not all skullcaps are the same. Like I say, the pink form and the white form are the sun lovers. There's also sort of a lavender magenta skullcap, which is a shade lover. So once again, pays to know what kind you're planting. But again, if you're looking for a